the book of Yov has something very interesting in it. It says, "Lo yigra mitzadik enav, ve'et melachim lekiseh, ve'yashivem lanetzach ve'yigbaru. Ve'im asurim bazikim, yilchedu mechavlei oni." This verse says, "He will not remove his eyes from the righteous man until he is on the throne with kings. He will sit them there forever. They will become exalted." This first verse, Yov 36:7, is saying that Hashem does not take his eye off the righteous. And the Gemara explains it, that means that a righteous person that does mitzvot, Hashem pays him his reward, not just in the next world, but in this world. So much so that he doesn't let it go until he pays him in full. That even if it takes several generations, even if the benefit of the mitzvah that the person did has to already go to the next generation and the next generation, his descendants will get the reward of a mitzvah that he did. Whether the mitzvah was tefillin, or the mitzvah was Shabbat, or the mitzvah was some type of chesed, anything that the person did, if the mitzvah is obviously exactly like it's supposed to be, Hashem pays the reward to the point where someone can get rewarded forever. And forever means just in Olam Haba and also in this world. How in this world? Where his descendants will get it. So this is good. This is good news. But then the verse continues. ויגד להם פעלם ופשעם כי יתגברו. And if they are shackled in fetters, trapped in ropes of affliction, he thus informs them of their errant deeds and their transgressions, for they have become overpowering. I'll continue reading in English, it's easier, I think, for everyone to understand. He opened their ears to discipline and said that they should turn back from wrongdoing. If they will listen and serve him, they will finish their days in goodness and their years in pleasantness. But if they will not listen, they will pass away the sword and expire for lack of knowledge. So there's a few really, really critical things that we just learned from this. We'll explain in a couple of minutes. So the first thing we know, if we do mitzvot, Hashem will pay us in full. In this world, in the next world, our children, our children's children, and following, and forever. But Hashem also tells us that if my reward that the reward that He gives us causes us to become arrogant, causes us to become conceited, causes us to have too much pride, and not be the same righteous person that we were when He gave us the reward. So we were righteous, we did good, we were tzaddikim, we did good things. Tefillot, tefillin, kosher, Shabbat, nidah, all the amazing things were amazing. We're the best, we're doing even above and beyond. Hashem says, you're a tzaddik, I'm going to give you a reward. You're going to have this, you're going to have money, you're going to have good kids, you're going to have Torah, you're going to have amazing things. So all of a sudden somebody says, I'm a full tzaddik, great. And he starts having pride. He starts thinking that he's special. Hashem says, that person, not only is it not good, but I will embarrass that person to the point of bringing poverty on him. Ve'yashpilo. He's going to embarrass that person. He will take him all the way from where they are to nothing. To absolute nothing as a punishment for taking a reward and in essence using it the wrong way. Using the reward that Hashem gave you for mitzvah against Hashem. What's against Hashem? It's something as simple as pride. Someone doesn't think, being pride is such a big deal? Hashem hates pride. Hashem hates someone that thinks that They need so much kavod. And Hashem says he cannot be in the same room as someone that is too prideful. So one, we learned that if we do good, we get rewarded forever. If we do bad, we get a special punishment from Hashem. Specifically says it in the book. This is in the Tanakh. This is not some foreign language or some mystical book. This is Torah. The embarrassment that we get, the poverty that we get, is to teach us a lesson. Until we do tshuva. And he says here, if that person does tshuva, then they will die in a good way. They'll get back, and I'll give them back, and they'll be rewarded, and so on. But if they don't do tshuva, they'll die in misery. And anytime Hashem talks about a life or death, it's not just this world, life or death. Life or death is also the next world. Somebody could say, okay, great, you know what? It's very interesting that in the book of Job, you mentioned this, but how do we know this is relevant to our life? How do we know he's talking about us? How do we know? Maybe he's not talking about us. Maybe he's talking about Job. Maybe he's talking about Job. Well, I know something, Bichlal. Who am I, Bichlal, to tell you that he's talking about you? Or he's talking about me? Or he's talking about you, or you, or you, or anybody? How do we know? Same Gemara, a few pages later, says, Am Yisrael, the Torah mentions that we had 48 prophets. 48 known prophets that are mentioned by name. Nevi'im. And 7 female prophetess. 7 women, 7 men, 48 men, or prophets. Okay, you have the names. The Gemara gives you the names. You have Abraham, Yitzhak, Yaakov, Moses, Aaron. You know, the list goes on, 48 names. Some of them are very, very well known, like Zechariah, Jeremiah, Amos, Eliyahu Navi, Elisha, the prophet, and so on. King David was a prophet, Solomon was a prophet, Ovadia. Okay, great. But the same Gemara says something very interesting. It says, we didn't have only 48 prophets. We had more prophets, double the amount of prophets, than the amount of people that left Egypt. Meaning in the Torah it specifically says that there were 600,000 men between the age 20 and 60, so there's obviously a lot more than 600,000, but it's referring specifically to that 600,000 number. There were 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60 that left Egypt. Throughout history, we had more than double that amount, which means at least 1.2 million, of prophets. Okay, so it's a lot of prophets. So why only 48 mentioned? And how is this connected to what we're talking about? The Gemara talks about, as Hashem said, if the prophecy that prophet said was relevant for future generations, meaning lanetzach, forever, if what they said was relevant forever, we know their name. Their words were recorded in the Torah. But if their words were only relevant to a specific time that they lived in, then it wasn't recorded. Which means that every one of the 48 prophets and every one of the 7 other prophets, the female prophets, that's recorded in the Torah, in the Tanakh, is relevant from then until forever. And that's how we know that when Hashem mentions this particular verse in the book of Job, and he says, I will reward the tzaddik forever for his descendants, just like I rewarded Rachel, the wife of Yaakov, for being modest. I gave her King Saul as one of her descendants. And just like I rewarded King Saul for being modest, I gave his descendant, I gave Esther from Megillat Esther. She was his descendant. So he was rewarded not just with money, not just with power, but even their descendants were great. So the righteous will get rewarded forever in this world and in the next world. But if those righteous turn into wicked, and they use the reward and become prideful and arrogant and do things that are against my Torah, I will take them down and embarrass them until they do tshuva. If it's relevant to them, and we just learned here that everything that the prophets say is relevant forever, then obviously it's relevant for us today.